Folks, this is Tom Opry, your host to the podcast where we ask the tough questions regarding man's impact on the world's wildlife. Raw and unfiltered, we strive to help you fully understand the real issues at hand. Our goal, ensuring the world's wildlife and wildlife habitat exists forever. Stay tuned for another edition of Shepherds of the Wild.
So Roland, when we first started filming Killing the Shepherd, what had happened the previous 15, 20 years in the Luano? Because, you know, back in the 80s, it was a Valhalla for wildlife, right? It had the big five, had black rhino, had elephant, Cape buffalo, lots of plains game. But what happened?
Lots of cats. I think basically it was an area that was kind of passed by in terms of national development. You know, that the governments of the day will always look at places where there's bigger populations and there's more support, and that's politics. That's what happens. But in a place like Luano, it was very much out of the way. It was it's small by national importance standards, and that was completely wrong. But that's how it was in the government of the day, and then slowly. The poachers moved in. It was an absolutely incredible area for wildlife, as you rightly say. It had the black rhino, which became a big attraction because of all the story behind the rhino horn and the poaching and that. And the last 200-pound elephant that were shot in Zambia were actually shot in the Rwanda in the late 1990s. So the area was an incredible storage place for all different species of animal. There was a Ansel's sable that was in there, and there's no sable in the Eastern Province as such, other than what have been translocated artificially. But there was a herd of sable there that was specifically a subspecies identified as the Ansel's sable, and we can't find them anymore. So one assumes that they had to have been wiped out. But the poaching, because of the elephant were there, so that attracted a poacher, but not necessarily for meat, more for its tusk, and the same with the rhino. So when those people come in, they realize that there was a lot of wildlife there as well, and it's not far from Lusaka. It's one of the closest hunting areas to Lusaka. So obviously the bushmeat industry became very, very attractive for the Luano to be the source of the supply of bushmeat. You can move it once you get it onto the blacktop, in a couple of hours you can have it back in Lusaka and escape the drag-nets of the law enforcement agencies. So that led itself to start the demise of the wildlife, and slowly and gradually the wildlife population started reducing until there was an operator that moved in. The government of this country have a way of putting the areas out to tender. So they put them out to tender and you bid. And if you're the highest bidder or the most, ultimately whichever method is applied, you get the area, and then you move into the area and you either hunt it or do whatever you've committed in your bid to do. So there was an outfitter that took over the area in 2003, and I think he realized when he took it over that it was not, even at that stage, it was not viable for hunting. So he put some effort into conservation, and credit to him. That is the only reason why ultimately never hunted the area for 10 years, and he lost it at the end of 2012. He put some efforts of anti-poaching into the area, and I think in the hope that the species of wildlife that were left there to either increase or at least be secure. And I think, to his credit, when we moved in at the end of 2015, beginning of 2016, the area was the area at least had a nucleus of game that we could start working with. And I don't think we even realized when we took over the area, it was in October 15, so effectively that was the rainy season. So we really started work in 2016, and we realized then that the wildlife populations were in a bit of a predicament, and so we resolved with the government that we would put in as much conservation effort, anti-poaching efforts as what we could but not in the normal way that everybody would think, is that you send out patrols of wildlife police officers to go out and look after the game. We did that, but on top of that, we tried to address the reason why the game populations had declined so rapidly and so badly. And we resolved then that first we were going to look after the community, look after the people. And so we put a huge humanitarian effort into it by slowly building schools. We put in an aquaculture project that had some results, because there was, at least we could give the community a source of protein that didn't come out of the bush. In other words, it wasn't an impala or a kudu or whatever. And that worked well. And also what we did then was we gained a lot of trust of the community. And by gaining that sort of trust, you start getting people talking about who are poaching, where they're hiding guns, who are wildlife police officers, village scouts that could come back in and be recruited or re-recruited into the anti-poaching efforts. And slowly we built it up, and we kind of ingratiated ourselves and ingrained ourselves into the community, to the good of us, the wildlife, and the community. And the story started going from there. So that's really where it happened. We've done a lot from the time we moved in. With the help of African children's schools, we've now got 7 classrooms where we've got 500 or 600 kids who go to school. That
three separate schools.
3 separate schools, yeah, 3 separate schools, 7 different, 3 classrooms in one school, 2 in one, 2 in the other. And we support the teachers, and we support the kids with uniforms and with textbooks and other reading and writing materials. And we've also renovated the clinic, and up at Lubalashi, which is a place up on the top of the hills, there was a clinic that was being built by the community, and they had gone about it the wrong way, and the Ministry of Health refused to license it. So we moved in with advice from the Ministry of Health, and we tore some of it down and rebuilt the rest of it. And now it's a licensed clinic, and it's actively operating. So there's a lot with African Children's Schools help. There was a church that was being built by the Seventh-day Adventists, and they had obviously run out of money, and so there was no roof on it, and the walls were bad. And African Children's Schools gave us some funding, and we moved in and we rebuilt it and put concrete floors and put pews in and put in a public address system for them, and so they've got a church that they can use, a proper church that they can use to worship. And
yeah, I think plus it's a community center too, right?
People can have meetings and stuff. Well, what was agreed was that the Seventh-day Adventists use the church for whatever community work that they want to do during the week, but on the Sunday when they don't worship in church, other denominations are allowed to go in and make use of the church. So it's become a much broader picture than just saying that it's a Seventh-day Adventist church. So yeah, that's also good as well. We've done a lot of work. We've built a very good camp. There's the areas, because looking at the map, the areas is very long and very slender, 5,500 odd square kilometers. So we had to build 2 camps, and we've got one that's in the main community center where the chief has his palace and where the traditional ceremonies take place, and there's a government looked after. There's a government school there that's looked after by the government, and then we built a camp there. We put a little aquaculture project there, and then we also moved much further east to the bottom corner of the area, and we built what we call our safari camp. It's called Chomba Base, and we operate from there. We've got a very nice camp there with very comfortable chalets for the clients. Small camp, but very adequate for what we need it for, and it's very popular. And that's where we conduct our hunting operations from, and that's where we kind of do most of our anti-poaching, where we do most of our anti-poaching, where the rations for the anti-poaching ammunition, guns, all that, are all kept in a safe there and in a locked up room. And when the scouts come in and they need to go out on patrol, they come and get their rations and all that from there. And then when they're done with their patrols, they go back and hand it all in there as well, and with all the records and all that. And so that's basically how it works out. So that once you've done all the, once you've laid all the foundations, it's a question of just maintenance and making sure that everything stays working. Of course, the rainy seasons come. This year we've had a very heavy rainy season, exceptionally heavy in the valley. Traditionally in the valleys, they only get about 10 or 12 inches of rain. And I think that looking at records on the internet, in general around the country, I think this year in the valley, in the Luangwa, in the south, in Luangwa, the western parts where the corridor is, they're way up in the 30-inch to 35-inch category, which has caused some problems. The roads are going to be in bad condition. We've not been able to get in to that part of the world, other than sending the scouts in by foot. But when we do go in, there's got to be a lot of work that we need to do to fix the roads. I don't know what's going to happen to the camp. Well, we got Wi-Fi, we've got Starlink at the camp, and we talk to them every day, and the camp seems fine. But the rest of it, I think, is going to be in a bit of a mess. It needs to be worked on when we get back in there. That's going to be an interesting situation. But that's the sort of thing that we have to do every year. And so that's really basically where we are. Of course, there's some species that were there in very good numbers. The elephant for a start, and the buffalo, puku, bit of that sort of thing. They were there in good numbers, and of course, puku are particularly susceptible and prone to poaching because they are they stay out in the open and their habits are very, very defined, so it's easy to kill them, but they become kind of the first choice, and that's why they were basically eradicated. We've got a small herd of impala that play around behind the camp, and we've got one puku female that's still with them. I suppose she stays with them because there's no other puku around, but we don't have any buffalo there. We see the odd tracks that we see that are tracks that were made during the rainy season. You can see the imprints of the buffalo in the ground,
and these are buffalo that have come from outside areas.
No, these are buffalo that were there was a buffalo were endemic to the area.
In large populations.
Yeah, but there's going to be some. The area is the road networks in the area are of course where we can open the roads and where you can happily drive with a vehicle. But there's lots of the area at the back of the hills and up in the higher land where it's very difficult to get to. And when we go up there and we do walks up there, you see buffalo tracks and you get surprised, and maybe it's just for 2 bulls, and then you read the scouts' reports and they saw fresh buffalo tracks and buffalo sign, buffalo droppings, showing that there's just 1 or 2 every scattered here and there, but by far are the big herds of buffalo not there anymore. They need to be needs to be addressed.
1 or 2 in an area that's like 1 million acres.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. No, that's and two, a buffalo tracks are very similar to cattle, but the only thing that we know that they wouldn't be cattle was because there's tsetse fly there in huge numbers. It's an area where there's a lot of tsetse fly, and the cattle will not survive where there's tsetse fly, so they are buffalo.
So talk to me a little bit about the actual species. So when we first got here in 2017, we didn't see hardly wildlife, and then you got your scouts out there, started to patrolling and stuff. There's just little pockets of game, but mostly it was just like you said, impala, bushbuck, kudu, warthog. That was kind of the main things there. Of course, there were still pockets of lions and leopard around, but hartebeest, obviously the puku, the Cape buffalo, zebra, all that stuff. It was locally extinct, wasn't it?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
And why was that?
I just think because You know that an area like that, if you go into the Luano and you see the habitat, you realize that it is very much a habitat that is going to favor the browsing animals. That's why we get the bushbuck and you get the kudu, and really when you do find them, they're in really good trophy quality and that sort of thing, is because we've got that type of habitat. Where you find the grasslands, where you would find your zebra, your hartebeest, the waterbuck, the game that are grazers predominantly. Because of that, those areas are a little bit limited because they're closer to the river, and therefore they're much easier for poachers to lay snares out, and the movements of the game is much more predictable. And I think that they became targets, and it's very easy once you get below a critical level. Was that the populations just can't breed up? They just don't breed up. And at the beginning, I mean, I remember back when, right at the beginning, I took my wife down to Chomba on the road, and we saw a common duiker, and she asked me, what do you think we're going to do here? You know, that we've seen one common duiker in traveling for 150 kilometers. We've seen one common duiker. And I said to her, just be patient. All we've got to do is solve the problem of the poaching, and nature will take care of itself. And sure enough, it has. And right now we've got very good populations of bushbuck, of impala, of kudu, warthog, waterbuck are coming up, roan are coming up like there's no tomorrow. And of course the roan are very, very specific, and they've got very, very defined habitat and habits as well. So the roan populations are coming up. Hippo and crocodile in the river. Crocodile, of course, very slow breeders, so they're hard to identify numbers and that, but they're there. The couple of crocodile that we've taken out of the area have been incredible sizes and ages. So yeah, very good. But so ideally, we need more of the stuff that was there before.
Yeah. So the plan now is to bring back species that have gone locally extinct, or are at number. I mean, one puku in 1 million acres. I mean, that's not really viable, right? It's not even a breeding pair. So what is the plan, and why is it going on now?
Well, the plan is that we have to now bite the bullet and start restocking, and we have to be very careful of identifying the species that were there, so that we're not going to throw animals into the area that were never there before, because there's a reason why they weren't there. That's because the habitat wasn't conducive to those animals surviving there. So it's a question of saying we need to put animals into that area that were there before if we want the whole circle to be complete. Our passion from the beginning wasn't to hunt it and to try and make money out of it at all. Our passion was to take an area that was depleted, look at the reason why it was depleted, and restock it and bring it back to the standards that it was before. So this is part of the plan, and this has been our strategy from the beginning. Now we need to rehabilitate it with buffalo, and with, of course, with puku. Puku are very good, because we've got lovely grasslands there, and there's lots of water, and it was very good for the puku. And if we're there and looking after it, and the scouts are of a different level now. We've spent a lot of money, again through Shepherds of Wildlife. We've sponsored the training of scouts, and in some cases the retraining of scouts to bring their standards up to something that's going to be conducive to what they're supposed to be doing. And it's not cheap, it's expensive. We are the only private company in Zambia, not one of the NGOs like Frankfurt Zoological or any of these people, but we're the only private company that have applied to bring in military style weapons that we can use for our wildlife police officers. Traditionally, what happens with weapons with wildlife police officers is that they are given to us by the government, by national parks, and we have to have an armorer that looks after them, and we have to account for them all the time, obviously. We have to account for the ammunition as well, and it's quite a performance, but they never give us enough guns, so the guns that they do give us are not in such wonderful condition at all. but they are weapons, and they're all that we had.
But when people hear the word military style weapons, they start to get a little queasy about that. So,
well, they can do.
But let me throw this out though. At the end of the day, it's not because of the local subsistence poachers that you need these weapons to protect your law enforcement officers.
Correct.
It's because of these highly organized, violent, militaristic bushmeat gangs, that the ones that came into Luano when there was nobody really there to keep them out, and they built their villages in the largest, where the largest concentration of game was, and they didn't plant crops, they planted drying racks and just eradicated anything and everything they could 7 days a week, 365 days a year.
It was open season.
Yeah.
The Luano was open season when we moved in. We found that it was open season. We found poachers camps all over the place. They had informers that were ingrained into the community, that were telling the poaching gangs, and they were gangs, and they moved around with military weapons. They moved around with whatever they needed to kill game, and it was common. Now the only way that you can defend yourself is not okay. So when you talk about military grade weapons, there's two reasons why that is a good choice. One, now let me just categorize one thing straight away, is that nobody in this country, other than the military themselves, the government army, the army and the police, are allowed to use a fully automatic weapon. That everybody has to use a weapon that is
semi-auto.
Yeah, semi-automatic. So you
just
can't,
like in America, if you want to go by yourself.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's right. So it's totally illegal. Yeah. And the AR-15s, the AR-10s, and things like that are available. They're very durable. That the scouts, when they move around the bush with them, they can't strip them down and clean them every night. They've got sweaty fingers on the barrels and things like that. And so the guns that we use have to be durable. And so we applied to the government for permission to import 25 AR-15s from one of the companies in the States that make them, through an agent, again through Shepherds, and it was and we successfully, it was approved, and we brought in 25 of these AR-15. We had a choice between the AR-10 and the AR-15. We chose the AR-15 because the gun was intended for protection of our scouts, not for hunting. The AR-10 is a 300 caliber, so ideally it was too big. So we needed, and also the ammo is more difficult to acquire and more costly. So we ended up with the AR-15s, that is a 223 or a 556, and that is what we carry extremely successfully. So that's where we've moved forward, and the idea is that it's there to protect our scouts, our wildlife police officers. They need the protection. They can't go out into the bush with an old Russian scout shotgun and expect to protect themselves against people that they've got military grade weapons and they're prepared to use them. So it's we've had a couple of shootouts with the scout with poachers. One of our scouts was shot in the leg, fortunately with a shotgun, in an ambush, and it took him a couple of months to recover from that, because they struggled to get all the pellets out of his leg, out of his inner thigh, and he's just lucky that his femoral artery wasn't cut, and he would have died on the spot. But it taught all our scouts a big lesson. No, fuck it, he can get out of the way. Sorry, you have to delete that.
Yeah.
But that shootout was what taught our scouts a very big lesson, because until then our scouts just thought that it was like, come on, let's go and do a little walk in the bush and see if we can find any poachers and make sure that we throw them out. That changed the dynamic radically, and suddenly the scouts realized that there was a lot of work that they were doing, that they had to do, and that they had to exercise more caution. And we noticed after that the sharpness, the diligence, the attention given to their patrols was dramatically increased, and the performance just went up through the roof. It just spiraled out right up through the roof, and it was really amazing to see. But we've done a lot, and we're still doing a lot, and it's a question now of keeping it all going. We've got the scouts trained, we've got the guns.
Let me intersect for it, but just to finish up, that threat and danger came from those highly militaristic, violent gangs, bushmeat gangs. They actually you guys were told that you and your son Alistair had hits put on you, contracts to have you killed, have you murdered.
Those were standard contracts that were put out to both of us, and we found that out through informers, that we were told very, very blatantly that if we didn't stop what we were doing, that we were going to become targets. And so we also had to up our game, and in fact, Alistair and myself and a youngster that was working for us, Brian Moran, we were opening up a road that ran along the Luano River, which is the whole of our northern boundary that runs from west to east. And there's a little tributary to that, and there was a little sandy riverbed, and early in the morning, we stopped there to have a look around to see if there was anywhere where we could make a cutting to be able to go through. And we noticed that there was some smoke that was coming up a little bit around the corner from where we were. So we walked around there to have a look, and there was a poacher's camp there, and one of the poachers just up and just fired a few shots with his AK-47, and then Alistair returned fire, and we kind of ducked for start. We got a bit of a surprise. It was a bit of a shock, and these guys then turned around and ran, and we gave chase, and we managed to recover the AK-47, but we couldn't get hold of them. They ran into the bush, and they either much better athletes than us, or they went and hid and we couldn't find them. But in any case, the element of danger was very much a primary concern. So we got the AK-47, and we went back to their camp, and we found all the stuff from their camp that they had left there, and we burnt the meat, and we destroyed most of the stuff that was there, and that kind of taught us a lesson. And after that, Alistair and we were in the camp up at Kapanda. We hadn't built the camp down at Chopper at that stage, and we went out to the car one morning, and we found an AK-47 bullet on the seat, and that was like, hang on a second, where did this AK-47 bullet come from? And somebody had obviously snuck into the camp and put it there as a warning to say that, there's two bullets, and the second one, you're going to know about it when it goes off. So it was something, again, too, is that we had to be extra careful. And that's when we started putting feelers out. And we found out that both of us, in fact, all three of us, Brian as well, Brian Moran, who was the youngster who was managing the camp for us at the time. And we realized that there was a contract put out on our heads. So this is quite an alarming situation. And what do you do about that? You have to just carry on. You just have to become especially cautious. After that, when we had to report that to the police, obviously, and when the police gave us permission to go to a gun dealer locally who had Ruger AR-15s, and they gave us licenses immediately to buy one for each of us. So Brian ended up with an AR, I did too, and so did Alistair, and we had to carry them wherever we went, because we never knew whether we had to defend ourselves and when. So it was quite an alarming thing,
Well, not a lot of people have to wake up every morning and wonder if they're going to get shot. I guess unless you live in some war zone.
Silly things that happened. My room, the Luano is down in the valley, and it is very, very hot. Even at this time of the year, you wake up sweating, and when you in October, November, you go and take a shower, and you come out of the shower and you dry yourself, and you just wet with sweat again. It's unbelievably hot. And so our rooms have very big windows and no glass in them. They just have fly screens to stop the mosquitoes and the bugs from coming in. And my bed was under the window. And when all this took place, we I moved my bed away from outside from under the window because I thought somebody can sneak in there and do something. But it's silly things that you get a little bit sensitive, and you kind of worry about things like that. But thankfully nothing has happened. I think maybe those threats were meant to discourage us rather than a serious threat on our lives. Anyway, we're all there, and we all carry on with what we're doing, and we get massive cooperation from the community as well. The population of the community has obviously it's increased a bit because of natural, the people breed, they have children, and so it goes on. But the amount of strangers that were moving into the area has radically reduced itself, because now they watch now. There's people that talk about, what are you doing here? Why are you here? No, that I'm here I need to buy honey. I need to come and see if I can buy fish. So no, who are you? So there's a lot more support that we get from the community to help us with the whole conservation picture.
Let's get back to the animals here. Why Cape buffalo and puku as far as the first animals to bring back to Luano?
What I've noticed, puku, yes, good choice. Puku, because puku are endemic to all the areas in the Luangwa, and
they're like cottontail rabbits in upstate New York. They're everywhere, right?
Yeah.
In most of the Luangwa, yeah. They're really non-existent in the Luano.
No, nothing. Yeah. That's so it was one of them, and it's also a relatively easy animal to capture and an easy animal to move, and they are very resistant to disease. They're a hardy animal, and they were there before, and there aren't any now. That's the big thing. There aren't any, and you've got to start from somewhere. Where do we start from? We start with sable, or we start with more zebra, or we start from whatever. And of course, when it comes to the bush itself, we've noticed that the bush is closing up. There's a lot of overgrowth.
Yeah, the vegetation you're talking
about. The vegetation.
It's changing.
Yeah, it's changing.
There's no impact.
And this goes to the buffalo story. It's changing, and it's changing because the big animals, the bovines, the big buffalo that move through the bush and open the bush, and buffalo are very, very, they will graze and browse. So they will eat grass, and they will eat leaves off the trees and that sort of stuff. And so they help to keep the bush open and to keep the bush alive. And they're not there. And we've noticed that the bush is thickening up. And I think that we've had a few elephant that have come through the area. They haven't really come to stay, but they've been there, and they move through the area, and they carry on going. You see, the other big problem that we haven't touched on here is that in a lot of hunting areas, a lot of the hunting areas, their design was to be what used to be called in the old days a first-class hunting area. We didn't have what's called a game management area. It was called a first-class hunting area, and that was always around the peripheries of the national parks, and those became the GMAs. So the idea was that if there was hunting, the hunting would first take place in the second-class hunting areas, where licensing and everything was a lot more slack, and you could buy a license to go and shoot whatever was in those second-class hunting areas. Now they call them open areas, and you need a license to hunt in an open area. But now it was much more restrictive for you to hunt in what was called a first-class hunting area. And the idea with that was that it had to be a buffer zone for the national parks. And because it was unfenced, no fences in any GMA in this country, there's no fences. It's all open range. So what it is that the game didn't recognize the difference between a national park and a hunting area. So the game would freely move between them both. And so it became a protection zone, but it also became a zone where, for example, if a hunting area is being poached or not being managed properly, the populations of game from the national park will move their way into the GMAs and help to keep the GMA stocked, which is fine. But in our case, the Luano has no national park that is next to it. There is a very small piece, which is the Lower Zambezi National Park. But the boundary to that is the is the main blacktop, the main road, the main Great East Road, and so it is. There's nothing will come across from there. In fact, if anything, the game will go back from there. So it became a very challenging situation. So we've got nowhere that the game can come from. Whatever we do in the Luano is going to be a betterment to all the areas around us. All the areas around us are going to benefit from us populating and looking after the Luano GMA. And that's basically the fact. It's a sad fact, but it's a fact. I would even think that in future we're going to end up by the stocking the northern reaches of the South of the Luangwa, the Lower Zambezi National Park.
So there's some great hope here, and but I mean the process. We met with Dr. Innocent yesterday.
Yeah, Billy.
Yeah, Billy, and very confident and very. I mean, he's presenting. To get the approval, he has to take the whole plan to a committee. And then that committee gives the final, yay or nay on whether or not this activity can occur. And he's presenting it himself. He's not sending an underling or somebody else. He's that active and wants to see this be successful. And we went over great length all the things that would be involved. And I mean, this is a production, and it's not a simple one. There's a lot of moving parts. There's a lot of things that are going to take time, expertise. Helicopters involved, 6x6 vehicles, multi-ton vehicles, 20-foot containers that you can subdivide out, so you can, like say, break up the Cape Buffalo bulls because they can't be in the same container together. It's fascinating, all the different elements that are going to go into this. But what does it really actually take to move wildlife hundreds of miles across Zambia to the Luano, which is not an easy place to get into?
Firstly, we have to look at the end result, not the first part. Capturing them, that's Dr. Innocent's baby. He knows exactly what he's going to do. They're going to subcontract, or they're going to contract people that are professional game capture and movement people that are going to do that. The government will pay for that, obviously at our cost or at the sponsor's cost. And then we then have to look at where they're going to go. Where they're going to go? They're going to have to be moved into the Luano. By far the most challenging and stressful part from everybody's point of view, but especially the wildlife, for the buffalo's point of view, is going to be the final part, the movement when they turn off the blacktop and they come out to the bomas that are going to be constructed to house them, to get them ready for their resettlement. We have to do a lot of work to the roads to make sure that the roads are in as good a condition as we possibly can get them, so that the game are less stressed, one, and two, that they can be moved in the least possible time. Because if the roads are really bad and the trucks are running along in first and second gear, it's going to take hours for them to get through. So we need to make sure that the roads are in good condition. And I already alluded to the state of the roads due to the rains this year. We've had a very big rainy season this year, so it's going to be a challenge to fix those roads for sure. We're going to have to get in some yellow machines to come in and give us a hand to put them back in good shape. And then, of course, then when the trucks reverse up to a gate and you open the gate, there's got to be a gate. And there's got to be a boma. There's got to be a facility, a holding facility, where the game are going to be, where the buffalo are going to be housed. Safely, securely,
so they can be acclimated.
That's right. So that they can settle down from
5
to
6 weeks.
Yeah, that's right. So we're looking at a month and a bit of change for us to have to look after them. We need to build the bomas. The bomas need to be to an acceptable standard. We're going to have to research that, because I've seen them. I've never built one, but I've seen them and I know what is involved. And we need to know that there's that the habitat right there where we build it is going to be adequate for them. They need to move around, they need to have water, they need to have food. Firstly, maybe grass. Secondly, it's going to be maybe hay and bran or something like that is going to look out to make them so that they stay fit and they stay healthy. And of course, we don't have to touch on the fact that if the buffalo come from the western part of Zambia and they are buffalo endemic to the western part of Zambia, they need to be tested for foot and mouth disease, because we don't want to bring foot and mouth disease into our area. So they need to be tested when they've been captured. They need to be tested, and all the ones that have got it need to be re-released and others captured. So there's quite a lengthy process that's going to come out of all this. If they come from the eastern province, then it's not a big issue. They'll just be captured, I would assume, loaded and brought straight out.
Yeah,
but it's going to be a different story.
But Dr. Anderson did tell us yesterday that they will test each buffalo for foot and mouth disease. And what they'll do is when they get them into the containers on the trucks, then they dart them from above. So every buffalo will be darted, and then they will do the test to make sure that, and that's how they'll be also to be able to sort the buffalo safely. And so also at the same time, well, not at the same time, but they'll have to be brought over there. So they're going to come from one of two different national parks, either Kafue or South Luangwa, national parks. And at the end of the day, it's going to be a testament to how it's going to happen. We know the puku are going to come from Kafue, so it'll be interesting to see at the end of the day how all this transpires. But I mean, there's an awful lot that goes into it.
No,
and we talk about government's not paying for this, folks. We all are going to pay for it. Yeah. I looked at this and said, wait a minute. The national park says, listen, as long as we pull animals out of national parks, we will give the community in Makasa these animals at no cost, including their time or their staff and everything else. But you will have to pay at the government rates that they've contracted with the capture folks. So it's still going to be a sizable chunk of money to pay for helicopters, to pay for the trucks, to pay for the veterinarians, to pay for all these people on there. And we're going to have to raise in excess of $100,000 US to be able to bring 50 buffalo, 50 puku, and be able to get them and build the bomas, because we got to pay for that. Now, the Ministry of Agriculture, according to Dr. Innocent, will provide you guys with all the specs you need, and right down to the takeoffs of how much material needs to be purchased based on the specs of what you guys work on. And Dr. Innocent's going to come to Luano once they get approval from the committee, and then you guys will cite where these bomas need to go. And so he'll make the final determination on that. And by then it's off to the races. Now we're talking about the middle of April, folks. It's coming up. And then you've got about 30 days or so to build these bomas, and then we're back to a period of probably June to do planning, and then we're looking at July to actually make this event occur. And we've got to raise all this money before July in order to make this, because the trap and transfer people have to be paid at least 2 weeks before they start to do the work on the ground. And so, I mean, this is going to be crazy, but at the end of the day, why is this restoration important to the future of Luano Valley? You touched a little bit on, what the impact it could have, but if you could succinctly just give me, what is the overall impact, and why is this important?
I think that I think it's important that when man upsets nature, and if there's a detrimental effect to everybody, to the human populations, to the biodiversity of the area itself. And what if there's a way that man can reverse the mistakes that he's made, then it should be done. Then people should be able to do that. And if there's a way that can be done, then that's what should happen. And what a pleasure for a company that is traditionally involved in the safari industry that are true conservationists, what a pleasure for them to be able to get involved and help an area to get back on its feet again, and to become a pristine area that was like that, what it was 20 or maybe 25 years ago. So I think that that's the idea. And I think that there are places where this is being done, but they are more fenced areas, very few in Zambia, but Zimbabwe and South Africa, it's a known strategy of them taking a farm and putting a big fence around it and then stocking it. But they stock it with whatever they can to buy and put in there, and they make the habitat work for the animals. Here, we don't want to do that. We're not allowed to put fences up. The only fence we're going to put up will be the fence around the boma that is going to hold these animals for the 5 or 6 weeks that it's going to happen. And then they'll be allowed to go free in an area where you were in the past. So I think it's a wonderful thing. And if there are people that are prepared to fund that, then we would be, that is the best way, because I can tell you that 100% with us, the idea of us as a safari company selling hunts in that area, we've been in that area for 10 years, and we get a quota of 46 or 48 animals every year, and there's no pressure on us to utilize that quota. We just utilize what we can, but we do it for 2 reasons. One is that we can generate a bit of revenue to be able to put back into conservation to try and make the area become self-sustaining. And the other side of it is because we can give meat to the community, and the community, by us giving them meat, the community then know that if they help us to look after the animals, they get the money from that and they get the meat. Whereas before, where there was just a poacher doing it, they very seldom got anything out of it. They very seldom got anything out of it. Two different levels of poacher. You've got the subsistence poacher that'll go out and kill an impala by putting a wire around its neck or by shooting it with a shotgun and then taking it home and eating it. And maybe if there's a big population of impala, maybe that would be sustainable. And then, of course, then you get the other side of it, is that you get the meat hunter who will come into an area. We've just had a situation right now where one of our scout patrols found they saw smoke in a very, very remote part of the area, and they snuck up on it, and they found a gang of poachers that were there. And these poachers had killed some impala and a couple of impala, some warthog and a young female kudu. And these guys, there was when they tried to tell the poachers to stop, we're still trying to get the information. This is very current, but the poachers apparently threw their guns on the floor and they ran away. And they found the cell phone, and they got a new gun, a new rifle, which is unusual. We're not sure yet whether it's a shotgun or a rifle, but whatever it is, it's new. And if it's new, it will be licensed. And if it's licensed, we'll be able to trace through the police. We'll be able to trace who the owner of it is. And we also found a cell phone, and we'll be able to get the cell phone to give us a lot of information. Can pick up a whole lot of information off a cell phone. So it's a big win for us, and it's a sad thing that a couple of animals were killed because of it. And but that's all an investigation. So it's a good thing. But that's the sort of thing that we're up against.
Yeah, I mean, every day. But you're talking about the anti-poaching thing, and I think people need to understand. You're not trying to put animals in there so you can go shoot and kill them. Okay. At the end of the day, as a safari company in remote Zambia, anywhere in Africa, you are providing a service to a community, to the wildlife, to the landscape, to those, to that ecosystem. You're doing the anti-poaching. You're also, not only are you out there not only protecting the wildlife resource, but you're also there protecting against illegal mining, illegal logging, illegal development, illegal charcoal production. I mean, all these things that your government doesn't have the resources to be able to do in these geographically remote areas. I mean, you guys are you're not a hunting safari company, you're a environmental protection company. And that's what you're doing, and you're doing it on behalf of the local communities. And of course, your own business model is to be able to propagate the animals so that you can have a limited offtake. And obviously, what is the end result? The byproduct of that is more biodiversity. It's a healthier ecosystem. You know, we've got concerns about global climate change. And so by doing the things you guys do, it is a much, much bigger picture than a hunting safari company. And so, folks, if you want to get behind this, I mean, we're going to set this up where you could give $50 and you could help out. To move one puku, it's $400 US. To move a Cape Buffalo, it's $1,500 US. You'll have an opportunity to help support and sponsor a puku, sponsor a Cape Buffalo. Heck, if you want to, you can sponsor the whole 50, right? But at the end of the day, we need to build the bomas. It's going to cost money. They involve, they got to be at 1.8 meters, about 7 or so feet high off the ground. They have to have 3 strands of electric wire, according to Dr. Innocent. You know, all of this costs money. And if you want to be a part of change, and again, as you said earlier in this conversation, Roland, having that buffalo herds, because there used to be thousands and thousands of buffalo in Luano, they're going to have a positive impact. And with those buffalo, when they move in there, we're hoping to start seeing maybe some elephants coming out of the lower Zambezi and coming back in the area, or maybe out of West Patahoki, one of the GMAs next door, where they really haven't been coming through that area, even though it is a historic migration route. But hopefully, and those animals, those big animals, have an incredibly positive impact on those ecosystems, because like you said, they do open up these scrublands, this gess and everything else, so that you can have all these different age classes of vegetation, which the other animals need in order to survive. So you get a whole lot better biodiversity, a whole lot healthier ecosystem. And it just takes getting things back to the way they were. And so that's why I've agreed to help raise the money for this, because at the end of the day, this whole project is something much bigger than me or your family, Roland, or the people of Shekabeta, or the people of Zambia. I mean, this is about leaving our planet better than we found it. And so I would urge anyone who's listening to this podcast or listening to the message tonight, go to shepherdsofwildlife.org. You can find us online. You can find us on social media. We'll have a page there for it'll be Killing the Shepherd 2. We're going to be documenting this for the film. It's the return of the wild. And there'll be a great opportunity for each and every person to get involved, to support this, to be an agent for change, to be a positive agent out there, a great supporter for this. And like I said, we're going to document it all. We're going to put it in the next film. It'll be part of a lot of the updates that are going on in Luano. A lot of really great things going on. Also some not so great things, but we'll get into that another day. But we just want to thank everybody for listening today. And please go to shepherdsofwildlife.org and be a part of the solution. Thank you.
There's one more thing I'd like to say, is that if you're a newcomer to what we're doing in the Luano and in Zambia, there's an incredible documentary, a multi-award-winning documentary called Killing the Shepherd, that will tell you more about what we're doing in the Luano with our sponsors, with our partners in our passion to rehabilitate the area. So look it up and watch it.
Yeah, and it's available at shepherdsofwildlife.org, but also it's available on Amazon, Tubi, I think iTunes, and a whole host of online platforms around the world. So you can see what we filmed a decade ago. We started a decade ago, 2017, and that film we finished filming in 2020, and during COVID. And it's a real heartbreaker, because conservation is not a simple thing. You know, the wise use of a natural resource. But if you want to really understand what the realities are on the ground, I highly recommend you watch that film, as Roland suggests. And again, part 2 will be coming out. We'll be documenting all these things, and you'll really get a full understanding of what the realities are on the ground when it comes to remote Africa, wildlife and rural communities, and the dignity that these people can realize and the benefits that they get from the hard work of conservation, because it's real. It's not make-believe stuff. Be careful what you listen to on the internet or even the mainstream media. If you want to understand the realities, listen to these people tell their stories, because it's true. It's real, it's raw, it's uncomfortable, but at the end of the day, if you really want to know what's going on in rural Africa, watch Killing the Shepherd, and then when we come out with Killing the Shepherd Part 2. Thanks, guys. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
For the next podcast.
Thank you. Take care. Be careful.
Thanks for listening. You can find this podcast wherever great podcasts live, including on the Shepherds of Wildlife Society website at shepherdsofwildlife.org. Please tell a friend, and let's save wildlife together.